There comes a point in life everyone's got to say they're wrong. Everybody makes a mistake. Everyone does something effed up. And nobody's really pressuring me in this. There's not a huge thing online. But I just want to say to Holly Madison, I am really sorry. And explaining this, Holly Madison, who's famous for being a model, entertainer, and of course the girls next door, recently went viral, for saying she's been diagnosed with autism later in her life, and she doesn't feel on the same wavelength with people. And, there's been a lot of debate on that, with some people going against her and some people saying, it's great for her to come out admitting that. And I had views that were pretty negative on it. The reason for that is RFK Jr., where he just did that quote recently saying he sees all these autistic people in airports and public places and they're never going to live, normal lives. And I've just been so angered by this false information about what autism is and what has caused the recent spike in diagnosis. It's truth, autism used to be diagnosed as 1 in 10,000, and now it's about 1 in 30 people. But a lot of people just don't really understand the explanation for that, and that's that autism was reclassified. Schools are taught to diagnose it with nurses and other professionals and doctors. So the whole way has changed, and now there's been this kind of autism mania where we're getting people who have had these severe issues where they'll never actually be verbal, and they're extremely rare, and they're getting linked to people who are moderate on the spectrum, like what Holly Madison is saying she is. So I did this video about Holly Madison, getting into her history, and then I was explaining, things like, she had a gamer podcast. I was wrong. It just sounds like from the podcast it was. I took one quick look at it. And then, I mocked her because she was in the cosplay thing. That was stupid of me as well. She's been doing that since the 2000s. And, I just did this whole thing where I said, I'm just kind of tired of people, saying this. And the reason is it doesn't relate necessarily to Holly Madison. It's just because I have noticed a couple of people who I follow on social media, some I know personally, who are extremely social people, who are, famous on social media. I'm not, once again, not going to say names, but they have been saying they are on the spectrum. And I just always kind of see these waves where, a few years ago, everybody was saying they were non-binary. Now everybody's kind of on the spectrum. And it just almost feels like this kind of insult because there are people who legitimately might feel that way, or people who might be more severe on the spectrum. And, it seems kind of almost like people are getting it out for clout. And I just, feel really bad for the Holly Madison thing because I think I went too far with bad information. And then at the same time, I am trying to diagnose a person without actually really ever meeting this person. I want to just take a moment to directly apologize to Holly Madison, what I said in that video, because that wasn't fair. I mean, look, I do think there is an overdiagnosis going on with autism. I really do, and I think it's something where there needs to be another word for it, because when people are being linked to something that is severely wrong, like I have a cousin who's a nonverbal autistic person who does live in a facility, and it just personally upsets me when I see every single day now more and more people are taking on that label and they're being linked to something like that. But then at the same time, I think people who are just moderate and are okay, they're being called that as well. And I do think there's a huge problem with that going on in society. But when it comes to Holly Madison, I just want to also, because, apparently my videos hit her feed sometimes, I just do want to make a point and, direct this directly at Holly. I do have a lot of respect for you as a person. You were really big at The Girls Next Door. My mom watched that show every day. My sister watched it. It was always on our TV. In fact, I inherited my, my parents' house after, my parents passed away. And that TV right there, which is kind of old now, that TV always had The Girls Next Door on. And I've always respected you for, bringing out your brand and trying to stay around and succeeding at that really well. And I think that without you, maybe the Kardashians wouldn't be as big. I don't think Paris Hilton would have had success, to the same level. And I actually do think people like me who do stuff with YouTube and social media, we exist partly because of you. So I think that I owe you a lot of credit there and a sincere apology. And it was immature what I did. It just really comes down again to this whole thing with RFK and Trump, where they're saying these things that they have no idea what they're talking about on autism. And then I also at the same time, so it's like one set of the media is making it seem like this is the tragedy, and people who are casually on the spectrum, like what your doctor is saying you are almost on the same level as people who are like my cousin that need to be in a hospital. But then at the same time, I'm also just seeing some people on social media where they're putting in their bios. They're constantly mentioning it like it's like, some sort of diversity bonus points. And it's just really annoying me. But, for the record, I don't know if you've seen my videos in the past. I've done videos with you that have gotten a lot more views than that video did. Millions of views, where we talked about Hugh Hefner and we talked about abuse, and I was defensive of you, and I saw negative comments and I was like, no, that's wrong. And then at the same time, I also saw commentary in the past, where you mentioned that you never took birth control when you were with Hugh Hefner. I actually turned that into a science video that got millions of views, where we were talking about the science of old man semen, and that was actually cool for me because it was this kind of weird thing where we got to take something that was pop culture and clickbait and turn it into something where people were commenting that they actually learned something real from it. So that was not my intention to really insult you there. It's just that it's RFK, it's Trump, it's a lot of clout chaser on social media, but I do have a lot of respect for you and your work in the past. You are 100% a content creator, 100% an influencer, and for people in my career, you truly are an icon, and I really do apologize in every sense of the word. I was stupid. I'm the one to blame here. If people want to unfollow me for it, I wouldn't blame them. But thank you very much, Holly Madison, for being a great content creator, for being somebody in the past who has talked about abusive relationships and some real stuff that does go on in Hollywood. I actually dated somebody in the past who was a model, actually for Playboy, who was in an abusive relationship with an older person. So you've definitely spoken out on a story that I think is relatable to a lot of people. And I'm just sorry. It was completely wrong. That's my apology. And with that, I'm Charles Perallo apologizing to Holly Madison. Thank you.